Up next, in A Girl and a Gun, we find out what some of those strange titles in film and television actually mean. We talk about how to do day for night, maybe even on the cheap. And we talk with Jason Owen about communications and how amazing that industry has become. All this on A Girl and a Gun, up now.
Girl on a Gun, episode 36, recorded on the 29th of May 2014. Jason Owen.
All you need to make them is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Hi, welcome to A Girl and a Gun, the program for filmmakers and content creators everywhere. I'm John Maisels. I'm sitting in this red chair, sort of by teleport, but good heavens, across the other side of the couch, it's Phil Moore. Welcome, Phil.
Hi, John. Hello, world.
And we've sort of swapped around because we've got a special guest joining us here on A Girl and a Gun. So welcome to Jason Owen, who is the Operations Manager for Riedel Communications Australia.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Phil.
Hey, welcome.
And like we've got Jason here because we want to talk about this amazing world of communications, which we used to think of as two people with a tin can talking to each other, and that's actually how it used to be in theatre.
That's the analogue world, isn't it?
It's a very analogue world, and you know, without any warning, in the last 10 years, we suddenly have this explosion of complexity that is communications. So look, before we even get into that, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to be sitting in this couch.
It all started for me in high school. There was a group of us, a couple of guys that got together and started our own school radio station. We then moved on to start running our own school discos, and this is, you know, mid-1980s, so it's a little while ago. Back when we had records, we used to have LPs.
I remember those.
I had a record collection.
Whoa.
I still have.
So that's how I started. I went and did my electronics trade. I went and then moved on to Channel 7.
You sort of caught the bug.
Yeah, so, and my father was always into electronics and electrical stuff, so I guess I got a little bit of that from him. But yeah, I went to Channel 7. I worked on the Olympics. I worked on the Australian Touring.
Hang on, you went or worked on Channel 7. I worked on the Olympics. Suddenly we're at the Olympics.
It's a big jump, isn't it? Yeah. So I mean, and there is a little bit of luck involved here. You know, there's hard work, there's good support and good training, but there's a little bit of luck. And that luck was that when I landed that job at Channel 7, you know, literally within a few months, I was in Barcelona. Now, I went there as a qualified tradesman, so I'd already finished my trade. And I was quite willing to go and do more study, and I think that was part of the thing. They saw that I was motivated and I was willing to do extra, go beyond the call. And I think that...
Where did you get those qualifications then?
TAFE?
Yep.
North Sydney TAFE.
North Sydney TAFE. Okay.
Glad to hear this.
Yeah.
Very glad to hear this.
North Sydney TAFE. And I mean, in those days, that TAFE had 100 teachers in the School of Engineering. And it was a massive facility because the TV networks were pushing through trainees, you know, every year. And that sort of buttressed their ability to deliver really good training. You know, they had great options for electives. You know, you could be a real engineer if you wanted to, or you could sort of touch on both sides of being an operations person or an engineering person.
Yeah.
In fact,
So you went the engineering route?
Yeah, I did, you know, and that was what I liked. You know, at school I was the maths and the tech drawing and the metalwork guy. I wasn't the English and the other, you know, that I was an engineering brain. So
all the things you need to know. Now you're a manager.
Yeah.
But look, we went from there into radio.
Yep, so I finished, I did a couple of years at Channel 7 and I moved over to Austereo, which is the Today FM and Triple M networks. I was an engineer there. By then I'd done my advanced certificate in electronics and communications. And I finished up doing my associate diploma in electronic engineering, again through North Sydney TAFE. Right. Stayed there for a number of years, moved to a couple of different AV companies, ran my own production company for about 5 years. Then went back to Austereo as the chief engineer and built that beautiful building in World Square where they now live. And then I went outside broadcast for television for a bunch of years, which was really good. And then I started at Reel about 18 months ago.
So television, radio, communications.
Yeah.
This is the life of people in this business. They're always moving around between jobs.
And that's the beauty of it, is that if you're willing and you're willing to have a go and stick your neck out, you know, and you've got a couple of good people who support you, and I think that's key to understand that you've got to have good people around you to support you, because you're not home a lot, you travel a lot, it's long hours, it is hard work, there's some tough personalities to deal with on the road, so you need a little bit of conditioning. You know, you need a bit of conditioning.
Barcelona was not, that was the first Olympics you worked on, but it's not the only one. You've done most of them since then, haven't you?
Yeah, every one since London. Every summer and winter since London. So it's quite a few, finishing in Sochi earlier this year. So I understand that beast pretty well, and it is a fantastic experience to work on the Olympics. You know, and certainly from a technology perspective, there's always, you know.
There we are. That's the thing about the Sochi Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some cutting edge technology at every Olympics. They'll push something the next step further and the next step further. It's something like an Olympics.
So what was your role at Sochi? What would you?
We had a team of 34 people there. I was the only Australian. There was one Brit, one Pole, one Tunisian, and the rest were Germans other than me. So
you're talking about the core engineering team support.
The
You must have
Riedel
had,
team,
you must
yeah.
have a whole heap more people, helping you to do this gig.
Yeah, so that was the full-time Riedel team, and then we had a bunch of cable hands and local support crew to go and do a lot of the grunt work for us. But to give you an idea, as we're talking about communications, and you're saying bits of string and tin cans. In Sochi, we deployed a UHF radio network, a massive one, a fibre optic multiplexing network to move content all around the venue, internet networks, Wi-Fi networks to control lighting systems, CCTV systems for audience control and for talent, staff control. A big FM system for wrangling all the content into the ears of the performers. There's about 16,000 cast in an opening ceremony for an Olympics.
16,000.
That's 16,000 little FM radios.
So they're all listening to little FM radios, and that's telling them what to do next.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
So when you
right.
say cast, you're not just talking about the presenters and the commentators. It's all the people that are in the presentation.
In the show, yeah. I mean,
the
you see
show.
these hundreds of kids run out and do their thing. They're part of the cast. There's 16,000 of those people in a show that size.
So, like in something like an Olympics opening, the one that you did in Sochi, for communications, how many conversations are actually happening at any one time?
Look, during the heat of the opening, there was 400 to 500 concurrent conversations going on our talkback matrix at once.
So people could talk to each other. This is not just the director talking to like all cameras, and there must have been more than one director, presumably.
Well, and you've got to look at it two different sides. So there's the event, which is the opening ceremony, and it's done very much like an event would be here. And then there's a broadcast which bolts onto the side of the event. It's there is two separate crews and two separate infrastructures.
So the one for the local audience in the stadium and the one for the rest of the world, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. And obviously they do cross over a lot, and generally there's not a lot of love between those two teams, no matter where you work. Because, if you work in the rock and roll space or, TV guys tend to be a pain, and the TV guys think the rock and roll guys are a pain. So
But it's all part of the same show, and it's all part of bringing it to the same audience. So
and that's what you're faced with on an Olympic scale size job. You're faced with this thing that we're all here to deliver the same thing, and this is the biggest thing on earth and the biggest show. And once you sort of get over that and go, okay, this is pretty cool actually, I dig this, then it becomes another gig, and then you can focus on what you got to do, because you get bits starstruck, sometimes.
Let's come back to something that people can see sort of locally. So as we're recording this, you're working, in fact have worked, because it's now running, on Vivid Sydney Festival, the lighting, and I believe you have for the first time done all the linking for all the lights down on the buildings on the quay.
Yeah, so the Filament Storm project, we...
which we can see, we can see the Customs House there.
Yeah, so we've provided a commercial 5 gig Wi-Fi network to allow the creative teams to control all their lighting fixtures remotely via Wi-Fi.
It's all run through Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And we can see that on the building there across the AMP building.
Yeah, and what that allows them to do is, it's cheaper, it's safer, it's quicker than pulling cables all through the street. And I've done several events in the city where we have been there in the middle of the night pulling fibre from light pole to light pole.
How do you get enough range on a Wi-Fi?
We use,
kind of thing?
but there's a number of antennas that we can use. So there's different antenna designs, different manufacturers' kit we can pull in, pull the tools in that we need. But generally what I do is I look at I do an overlay of the topography we're dealing with, and I do a network design of how I want it to work. Right. Then I get the bits that I need, and away we go. But this is when you're sort of delving into a bit more higher detailed knowledge about RF planning, and system design. It's not sort of, it's just a bunch of iPhones, sharing FaceTime.
This is not like suck it and see, like you do with your home network. This is really got to work. How does it feel coming into something like that for the first time?
Yeah.
Like you're next on the block, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, and a lot of jokes, stories came out of Sochi. When the fifth ring didn't light up in the opening ceremony. I mean, we'd rehearsed that a couple of nights prior with President Putin there, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously the day after it didn't work, there's all these stories about, oh, someone's going to disappear, and, you know, which is all rubbish. I mean, it didn't happen at all.
You're still here.
Everyone's very supportive of the whole thing. It's, you know, mistakes happen. We're using mechanical devices, they break.
Oh, look, it's amazing on a show of that scale that more doesn't go wrong sometimes. You know, they're so
But you remember
huge.
how close we got at the opening to the Australian Olympics. I mean, the cauldron was within like milliseconds of not actually igniting, and then it, you know, it did. The show went on.
Well, that's why there's an element of risk. So when you push forward these technological advancements, there's an element of risk in that it might fail, but if it works, wow, it's going to be really amazing.
Well, speaking of that, the next thing you're working on now is pushing that envelope even further now, isn't it? The V8 Supercars.
Yeah, so V8s, we contracted at the start of the year to provide to manage their communications basically for the teams and for V8 Supercars management.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, so what's going to happen at the end of the year is V8s have got some legacy equipment and some licensing issues because of the ACMA changes. That's going to really force them to make some drastic changes to the way they do their communications. And when I mean communications, I mean the drivers talking to the pit crews and the pit crews talking to each other and back to the driver.
Because this has always been a very traditional sort of infrastructure with radios based on FM, but a lot of those frequencies have now been sold so that we can all use our 3G and 4G telephone.
Yeah, so
and the entire rearrangement of the spectrum after the analog television switch off.
Yeah, so look, there's a number of changes the ACMA are doing, and this is one of the effects will be on a competition like V8 Supercars.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a considerable reinvestment this year in order to be compliant next year and into the future. So, you know, we're basically trying to develop a plan for them that will allow them to be future-proofed.
But surely this is an opportunity, because you now get to go to different types of technology, like digital technologies, that let you do all kinds of things that you couldn't do in the past with the simple handheld radio.
And we, luckily, we can pull a lot of data out of our experience with F1. We do F1 worldwide, and we provide communications all through pit lane or F1 management for Formula One motor racing worldwide. So there's a lot of resource I can draw on there in our business and say, right, how do you do that, and how's that work in F1 being the marquee motorsporting event. So we are going to plug in certain technologies and try and integrate better with the broadcasters, because there is a change in broadcast next year. Fox Sports and Channel 10 will pick up V8 Supercars, and they are innovators. Now, I've worked with all the networks, and I think Fox are probably one of the biggest innovators out there. They want to do something new and cool and the next thing. So it's good because it gives us some challenges. You know, it's not the cookie cutter television.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about the migration to digital technology, because it's not without downsides. One thing is that everything takes a little longer to process, so you get latencies, signals turn up a little bit late. Like, does this cause practical problems that you didn't have with the analog signals?
Look, there's a number of users out there that just blatantly go, I'm not using digital radios. You know, the latency's no good, I can't use it.
But there's always been latency to some extent, even analog. So.
Well, not with analog. I mean, other than like to the moon and back or to the satellite and back, quarter of a second, you get used to that.
And what it is, it's not, I mean...
We're now talking about seconds.
The time to transmit data from A to B, whether it's analog or digital, does not change. It's propagated by the speed of sound.
Yes.
Full stop.
Light.
It's fixed. Well, speed of sound, if it's, you know, if you're transmitting sound, if it's RF, it's different. If it's light, etc., etc.
Yep.
But it's a fixed known quantity. So, whereas if you're talking about the time it takes to encode that data and decode that data, this is where your latency comes in digital systems. Because it takes my voice into a radio, converts it to digital, that takes time, transmits it A to B, which takes the same amount of time, whether it's analog or digital, decodes it back to a voice that you can hear.
And it may just be milliseconds, but they add up. Yeah.
It does add up, and certainly in a live television situation where directors' calls and that need to be, you know, like this.
Very quick.
It doesn't really work in that environment, and I think that it will probably be one of the only scenarios where analog radios will survive in the future. In 5 years' time, everybody will be using digital radios. Yeah. The market will drive it that way. The manufacturers will provide pricing models that support that, and certainly the changes to the ACMA make us be a little bit more conservative and more efficient with our spectrum, with the frequencies that we use.
Yeah. If you've just joined us on A Girl and a Gun, we're talking with Jason Owen, who's the Operations Manager for Riedel Communications. And Jason, look, you're talking now about getting to grips with new technologies and sending people all around the world. I mean, this means you're going to need people who know this technology. How do you get into this game?
Yeah, it is an interesting conversation. I would probably talk about hours for that, because I think that, like I said, there's a bit of luck, there's some hard work, and there's some good training. I think they're the three things that have got to really come together for you.
Well, so if somebody wants to get training for this, where do they go? They want to learn about communication.
Well, you said earlier you studied at North Sydney, but that isn't happening anymore?
No, well, certainly the traineeship program that existed back then doesn't exist anymore. The networks don't really do it anymore. I think the ABC probably still have something like that, but the numbers are so small, and most of those people tend to move into the production environment. You know, they end up being, you know, directors, producers, cameramen, those sort of people, TDs. But the engineering side is really light on. I mean, it really is very light on. I speak to a number of colleges around Australia, and I go there, and everyone wants to be a director. Everyone wants to make a movie. No one wants to be the guy behind the camera or behind the scenes anymore. Whether it's not interesting or more, I don't know. But that's the way it's gone. So therefore, no one's being trained how to do those things.
But it sounds like the stuff you're doing is really exciting. I mean, it involves travel, it involves playing with toys, it involves meeting people.
And it's problem solving.
Yeah, and solving. And why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, that's the way I've survived in my industry, is that I've stuck my neck out sometimes and gone, yep, I'll go and do that job. Wow.
So somebody,
You know,
if somebody
it's
wants
gonna be
to
hard.
get involved with communications right now, they go, oh yeah, I'm inspired by what I've just heard. What should they do? What can they do to go and learn, or you know, who do they?
So what
who
kind
do
of
they
people
call?
are you looking for, and how do they get into it? Yeah.
Okay, the kind of people I'm looking for is the kind of person who is self-motivated, who is, I guess, outward going. They need to be reasonably resilient socially, because it's a tough environment to work in. I need someone who is going to turn up on time. That's probably one of the biggest things
Don't we all?
in television. You know, the news starts at 6 o'clock, not 6:01, because you didn't get out of bed. So that's one of the biggest things, bugbears that I have. And certainly your communication skills, your interpersonal skills need to be really good. You know, and look, there's obviously people there that need to be nurtured and mentored, you know, out of their shell. And I'm all good with that, because I think if they've got the right attitude, you can teach anybody anything. I can teach you how to fix a widget, fix a box, anything if you've got the right attitude. If you
So
don't
given someone with that right attitude, how do they get their foot in that door then, and get you teaching them, so to speak?
Yeah, look, look, doing something through TAFE or through university is definitely the right way to start, because it gives you a very broad overview of what the industry is about, whether it be for film or whether it be for television, or you know, for event-based lighting, audio, sound. So I think that's definitely the right way to start. You've then got to put yourself out there with companies like us, with, you know, the Gearhouses, the Globals, the Jans, those sort of big companies, and stick your nose in the door and annoy them until you get a response out of them. I mean, and I mean that. I think that, you know, one of the guys I gave an internship to last year from Charles Sturt Uni in Wagga, he was with us for a couple of months, and he got poached by Gearhouse Broadcast, and he's now an audio assistant in outside broadcast. I mean,
So be persistent.
yeah, I mean, he's been in the industry for a couple of years now. I mean, and he's on his way, because he's a go-getter, you know, and he rang me every 3 months. Yeah, I'm here, I'm still here. Any work for me? Can I come and, you know, help you run cables or anything? I'll do anything, you know.
So find the company you would like to work for, and then just try to impress them, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think that there's you do and get to the trade shows, and, you know, be seen. You know, you've got to get your face in front of these people, because there is a shortage of work skills, and certainly people like me, I think I have an eye to spot those sort of people, and because I have a shortage of good talent, if I spot people and I go, you know what, you've actually got a really good attitude, I like you as a person, I can teach you how to do all the other stuff. You know,
So you know, when the million people who are watching this program watch this and hear what you've just said, you're going to get 1,000 phone calls. You're aware of this, aren't you?
Well, you know what, when I recruited for a job at Austereo, I recruited for a senior engineer there, and I had over 1,000 job applications.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people out there that want to have a crack at it, because, you know, working at Today FM or Triple M is really cool, and it is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, radio is such a dynamic environment. I think it's actually a really good breeding ground. You know, I think that if anyone who's you know, has an interest in sound or communications, go to your local community radio station, bang on the door, and volunteer to go and do stuff at the local
Yeah, even if you
radio
can't
station.
find the training, you can get trained by places like that.
Go and start there, and, you know, when you write to a radio station and you get your letter sent to someone like me who's a chief engineer, and I read that you've done 5 years at 2RN at Lithgow or somewhere like that, I mean, I will take that and go, wow, this kid's really keen. You know, they want to learn. So you take them in, you bring them under your wing, and away they go. I mean,
Well, there you go, some great tips. Jason, look, there's so many things we could talk about. I think we're going to have to get you back to talk about audio-video bridging, a technology that I know you're involved with, but hardly anybody knows about.
Yes.
And so many of the other things that you mentioned. Thanks so much for joining us on A Girl and a Gun.
Thank you,
problem.
Jason.
Thank you for having me.
You're with A Girl and a Gun, and in just a second, we're going to have Pick My Brain. Over to Phil.
Indeed we are. It's time to pick my brain, and I'm going to sit in my red chair for this. Back in my chair. All right. Thank you very much for taking that, John. That was TV talk, and I don't know half of what that was about.
One day you will, because you're here at TAFE. We'll educate you.
I have to do a course here, I think.
We can make that happen.
All right, but now it's time to pick my brain. Let's have the first question.
So I'm making a horror movie, and I've heard it's possible to make daytime look like night. How do you do that?
Daytime look like night.
Well, that's called day for
Day
night,
for night,
isn't it?
yeah.
How does that work?
You would shoot it as per normal, but in the post-production grade, which was very crude in those days, they just darken the image. And you can tell in old films it's just darkened. The way you can spot it is if you can see the sky at all, it's clearly a bright sky. So what you want to do if you're shooting day for night, you want an overcast day that darkens the sky a bit and does not cast shadows.
Right.
Because you don't tend to have shadows at night.
Not unless there's a practical
A very,
light
very
somewhere.
big bright moon or practical light.
Yeah.
You know, so these days it's a bit easier. You can shoot during the day and light it appropriately, and in the grading process, you can quite literally make it look like nighttime
Can you
with
just
a lot
like
of effort.
CG out the sky? Is that what
You
do?
can if you want to. You can CG out the sky. You add power windows and all sorts of things. If you look at some of the shots in, like for example, Wolf Creek, the Australian horror film, a lot of those exterior sequences in that are day for night. You wouldn't pick it. Like the stuff when they're going over the cliff towards the end, it's like, that is shot during daytime. It's a total nighttime scene.
Well, I mean, if it's shot during the day and it's done day for night and you can't pick it, who cares?
Well, okay, why do it? It is easier to shoot in the day. People are awake. You can see what you're doing.
Right.
You know, shooting at night can be difficult, you know, especially, and it can be potentially dangerous if it's a stunt action kind of sequence. That said, sometimes it is better to shoot at nighttime for a nighttime sequence. At least it's dark. You don't have to worry about the post-production process. It's true nighttime. But then you've got to light it appropriately.
Well, is there a cheap way to shoot day for night? Like, you know, if you're doing a guerrilla shot or a short or something, you're on very limited budget. Are there any tricks you can pull that would make that work and make the job easier?
If you know your post-production, yes, you can shoot it almost as is and then fiddle with it a lot in post. If you don't have that, basically avoid showing the sky, do it on an overcast day, all of that kind of stuff, and try not to light it too much like it was daytime. Like if you're indoors, it doesn't matter. Black out the windows.
Yeah.
If it's a nighttime scene and you can see out the windows in this day, just black out the windows and then you're covered. If it's outdoors, it's always a bit sketchy. Yeah. It takes a lot of work to make it look real, to be honest. Yeah, and that's day for night. We have another Pick My Brain question. Let's have a look at it now.
So when I watch credits in movies, I see job titles like gaffer, gripper, line producer, clapper loader. What does that mean?
Oh, gaffer,
Wow, so many of them.
gripper.
Well, grip, not gripper. A gripper would be a tool.
Yeah, line
although I know
producer-
some grips who are. No, I'm not going to go there. I didn't say that. Really.
A line producer, you mentioned. What was the fourth one? Okay, gaffer. Gaffer is the lighting guy. Okay, gaffer works.
Gaffer would be the head lighting
guy.
lighting electrician.
Who works with the DOP, the director of photography, in lighting the scene. So the DP and the director will say, this is what we're looking for. And the DP will say, here's how we're going to light it. And the gaffer is the guy with the lights. And he sets them up and does all that.
And then, of course, working with the gaffer, you would have the best boy.
Is working under the gaffer, that's right. Working with the gaffer to help set all that up.
So this is your head electrician.
The electricians.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
film credits call them the electricians as well.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a studio situation, they're the same kind of thing.
Right.
Grip, that's the other camera assistant who works on moving the camera around. Everything from the tripod to the dolly to the jibs and the cranes, all the stuff that moves the camera is Grip's department, basically.
Well, moving things. But you see, I was once told, I was a director I knew, and he said, you know, grips aren't just about moving the cameras. He said, do you remember a commercial? He talked about this commercial, which was an amazing shot where the camera just came into a car, went towards the car, went through the car window and settled on somebody. He said it was a grip who worked out how to do that. And the whole thing, the whole move was masterminded by
These days, a lot of these very clever camera moves, going back to Hitchcock even,
Yeah.
you know, and nowadays Spielberg's done these kind of things where they've got these very fancy moving shots that keep going. How on earth did they do that?
Yeah.
And it's very much a combination of clever grips, which includes mounts on travelling vehicles and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and a bit of CGI sometimes.
Sometimes.
You know, it's a combination of the two. But it takes moving that camera around, moving it inside the windscreen. If you look at Gravity, for example, the film, which is a lot of CGI, but there is still real camera movement with the actors to simulate all of that.
Yeah, because you've got the dolly grip, the person who is moving a dolly, but if that isn't moved smoothly, the scene can be worthless.
Yes, moving that camera smoothly. I did a short film recently, as I mentioned last week, and there's big travelling crane shots, and if it's at the end of an extended crane, it tends to bounce. All of this kind of stuff to keep it nice and smooth. It seems like a simple job, but it's a very important job, because if the camera gets that move wrong,
yeah, absolutely.
Do it again.
What about line producer versus producer?
There are so many kinds of producers. There's executive producers, which usually are the money people or marketing side of things. They're the people that help get the funds for the film made.
Or the showrunner, maybe.
Yes, in television, although the showrunner is often the producer, the writer producer. The producer, as such, is usually the real guy or gal who's in charge. They are making this happen. Line producer is the person that's more responsible. It changes. It can be the person that helps work out the budget and the schedule for things in collaboration with the first AD. They're responsible kind of with the production manager on set during the actual physical production of things. There's a few different ways to interpret line producer. Then you've got associate producers. There's all kinds of credits for producers. It gets a bit confusing.
It's funny how we have these terms, like when you talk about first assistant director, and the first assistant director isn't actually about cameras or anything else at all. The first assistant director is about making sure the production works.
Yeah, the first AD is not actually
like a
a
business
director's
manager.
assistant.
Yeah.
Like, they're actually part of the production management side of things.
Yeah.
They're responsible for making sure the day goes according to schedule, and they're in charge of that set to that extent.
Which is a massively important job.
Absolutely.
So the creative people can go and focus on being creative.
Yes, and the director, you know, as a head of department, is in charge of essentially story and performance. The DP is essentially in charge of the camera and how that's done and how it's lit.
Capture and look and feel.
And then there's a sound department, you know, which may be one or two people, but still vitally important. First AD makes sure all of that works. Then you've got production design, art direction, which includes wardrobe and makeup and hair and all of these people, and standby props and all the people that involved with all the set dressing and everything else, all of these roles. So there's these core departments, and then you go to post-production, editing and sound design, and they've all got their levels of assistance. So we can't go through every single one of them, but that's some of those, the ones you asked about, that's some of the details of what they do.
But you really started me thinking, and I want to go and find the person who's responsible for hair.
For hair?
Yeah.
My hair's
I
not
just
right?
like some.
You'd like to have some hair. Wig!
So there you go. It's an introduction to some of the things that we do in television and film.
And it actually is a bit different between film and TV sometimes, these roles.
Yeah.
But we won't go into that. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Phil.
And thank you, Jason, for joining us earlier. That's our show for today. Thank you for watching A Girl and a Gun. If you want to reach us, you can contact us, Veronica at agirlandagun.tv, or tweet us at A Girl and a Gun. But for now, thank you all. Thanks for watching. That's a wrap.